What in the world is going on with Kansas State football?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Portal Podcast and a crossover with Locked On Kansas State. I am Brian Smith, your host today, a longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast and Locked On K-State a part of your day each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today's show, I'm going to have my guy here, Christian. Christian, this is going to be a touchy show for you and one that you're probably not looking forward to, but it's got to be said. We're going to try to figure out if K-State's even going to a bowl. Do they have a chance in the Big 12? What in the world is going on with the offensive line in the secondary? Your guy Brown gets like one catch for 5 yards, but the other receivers did play good. There's some weirdness to K-State and the vibe, though. Just overall, the vibe. If nothing else you take from this show, I didn't like the vibe with how Army just bludgeoned them with like a rubber mallet.
Yeah.
That's what Kansas State has always done to everybody. So, Christian, just give me your opening take after K-State loses 24-21 to Army West Point.
God, how long do we have on this show today, Brian? Now I'm telling you what, it's crazy, and I appreciate you having me on doing a crossover because I have so many words to say, and when you're doing it by yourself, it gets jumbled. So it's nice kind of like bouncing back with somebody after having a loss like this, losing the Army 24-21. I mean, this is a team that, I'll respect the Army for the record, but they just lost to an FCS opponent in Tarleton State the week before. And not only are you spending a $1.1 million to have them come to Manhattan on Fort Riley Day, that $1 million that you gained in revenue to go to Dublin, you get the loss on there. So no net revenues for Kansas State here. Overall, just a deflating feeling for Kansas State because you lose a close one in Dublin against a tough team of Iowa State. I mean, I think that one could have been a coin flip. I didn't feel bad about that loss, Brian. And then you almost lose to FCS North Dakota next week, and then you do lose to Army the following week. This offensive line is a huge concern. This defense just couldn't get off the field, which there's just a lot of issues as well. Overall vibe, though, just super deflating.
I agree. I remember I was on my phone. I tried to watch instead of just like using quad boxes and all that stuff. I tried to focus on specific games, which I did. And I didn't see any of the K-State game until I saw the score and I went, whoa.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay. First question was like, did Avery Johnson get hurt, or was there something else? Brown or something like? Was there something like that? That's always a possibility. But then I went and looked. Okay, he didn't throw a ton, but he wasn't bad. Like, what's the deal? And talking to you, like their secondary has issues. They don't tackle well, and then the offensive line. Look, there's no nice way to say this, but I'm looking at the stats here. All right, there are stats that are sometimes quote unquote made up, and then there's stats like this. This is against Army. And again, you mentioned it. This is against a team that lost to Tarleton State the week before. Your leading rusher was Jackson. He's a good player. 7 carries for 32 yards. That is your leading rusher. So it's average per carry is 4.3. That's not terrible. And then Rice averaged 4.7. That tells me that in your situational stuff, 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 1s, you didn't do well against Army. Secondarily, I question play calling if you're averaging over 4 yards a carry and you still only scored 21 points against Army. Am I missing anything here? Am I wrong on either one of those?
No, I'd say the main takeaways here, and we'll start with defense first. They didn't start off strong enough in the first half. I mean, there was times where they settled for field goals instead of getting 7 points. You just can't do that against an Army team. The Correct. Service Academy is going to nickel and dime you. I mean, that's just their way of playing football. They're going to find a way to get 2-3 yards every time, and then they play 4-down football, Brian. That's just their route of doing things. You have to find a way to stop him, and that just wasn't happening with Kansas State. Where it really went downhill, though, is in the second half. And what's crazy, and I've never heard a head coach say that he was actually thinks that a kick return for a touchdown actually was the worst thing that could happen for your team, but he kind of makes a solid point. Kansas State had a 99-yard kick return to go for a touchdown in the third quarter, but it happened right after a 14-play, 89-yard drive by Army that lasted 8 minutes, and the defense needed a rest, right? So then they take a 99-yard kick return. Then Army comes right back on the field, a 13-play, 57-yard drive for 7 minutes, and then they get a field goal. Okay, so there's a swing right there, point swing. You think, okay, it's time for Avery to get back on the field. They're at this point, they're still up 21-17. Army commits an onside kick. They get back on the field for 14 plays, another 8 minutes. The defense was on the field, the exception of a kick return for a touchdown, for like 20 minutes of game time. So the defense was absolutely gassed, more than they were in week 0 against Dublin. And by no means is this an excuse how you should be playing against a service academy, being a Power 4 school, a team that you and I have both talked about in the past about being a Big 12 contender. You and I both said in the offseason that we thought this team was going to be 10-2. Like, I remember this conversation quite vividly. We agreed on our prediction, and they're already at 2 losses before they even get to their final non-conference game against Arizona this Friday.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I don't even know the guy's name for Army. The onside kick is brilliant. That is brilliant. I'll give him credit.
Jeff Munkin. Yeah, Jeff Munkin. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. The way they did it was electric too. I mean, all props to Army. They kicked it at the front line, and it was a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at the front line player. Bounced off him. It was an Army bounce. They recovered it. They had no idea it was coming. Now, the coaching staff said they practiced and planned for it all week long. If that's the case, then it was just a terrible production and performance, because some of the players were getting ready for a normal kick return, and then that happens. It was bad looks overall for Kansas State. I know this is a very negative conversation, but it's hard to take some positives from this, if there's anything at all. I will say, if there's one positive, and you won't see this if you look at the box score, Avery Johnson is nowhere to be blamed for this. Although he was 15 for 25 in completions, maybe 2 of those passes were because of him. There was so many drop passes by the wide receivers, something that Kansas State has struggled with for a couple years now. Hopefully trying to fix that in the portal just hasn't been the answer over the last couple seasons. Although these receivers are better than what the portal brought in last season, Brian, they're still dropping footballs. Avery Johnson threw some dimes, and some absolute dimes in this game, and they just didn't work out. I really feel for, compared to everybody on this roster, I feel for Avery Johnson, because he feels like he's just out there alone in the room. Like, picture that meme, that GIF, John Travolta just sitting there looking around. That's exactly what I feel about Avery Johnson right now with this Kansas State team.
Well, I think that if they're going to salvage this season, it will start with the secondary getting better, the tackling getting better, little things, but more than anything else, something you told me off air, and this has been the bread and butter, not even before Kleinman was the head coach. Kansas State is a physical downhill team on both sides of the ball historically. And I didn't think their front was bad against Iowa State. Army is a really difficult team to prepare for. And I know this isn't going to make a lot of people that are service members happy. You're not going to get college kids fired up to play Army. You're not. I don't care what you do. They will not you're not going to get 100% the week in practice, which is not good. And you're probably not going to get 100% until the scoreboard changes. And then it's too late. Sounds a lot like that's what happened here, especially after they got a lead. They took their foot off the brake or the gas, and Army never does. They're service members. That's what they're trained to do. And you know that firsthand. There's no way that Kansas State took this game seriously, and they paid for it. Now, it's still on Kleinman and the players, but they got to be more emotionally invested in everything they do. It's not a mature team.
What's sad about that? No, it's fair completely. And what's sad about that, Brian, is they completely should have took this seriously, because just a week before they only beat North Dakota, an FCS school, by 3 points. A team that they had to do a game-winning drive from Avery Johnson with just minutes to go just to take the lead. They should have lost that game. We should be having this conversation right now. Kansas State should be 0-3.
Yeah, well, I mean, Avery Johnson is one of those players that has so much talent. It is weird to have him at K-State. You know, they're one. I put 0-2 on my screen for those of you on YouTube. I forgot they even played that team last week, but that's a good point. They're not emotionally a mature team. We'll talk about that next, but I also want to talk about how do you rebound from this? Is there a possibility? I'm not really sure the best answer. That is next here on this crossover, Locked on the Portal and Locked on K-State. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Real-time inventory, honest lead times, they keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service allows you to have your blind side covered. If you need parts fast, Supply House has next-day delivery. You can talk about that with anybody over there at Supply House. You also have parts in all kinds of different ways, and you've got different ways to get them with Finder tools and 3D schematics. Supply House has got you covered there as well. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support lines. SupplyHouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's SupplyHouse.com. Real people and real service. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. College football is back. I can't be more excited. All the tailgates, all the rivalries, and all the energy in the stands. There's nothing quite like it. But let's be real. Actually, getting great tickets can feel a little bit like a battle, and more so than the game itself. All the hidden fees and different things with the prices. It's not a lot of fun when you jump in at the checkout line. That's where Game Time comes in for me, and it should for you as well. It's the app that gives you the advantage because you find out what the price is up front, and you don't have to worry about it. Game Time also gives you seat view right from your phone. I looked at the prices for several games coming up, several rivalry games. You can get tickets for under $100. And to be really honest, there's not a lot of different ways you can do that unless you go ahead and find it. Jump on the Game Time app today. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, Christian, thank you for joining the show. This is Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and host of The Portal, doing crossover with Christian Rowe with a despondent Kansas State fan base, I would assume. You should be 0-3, and I gave you credit. You're only 0-2 on my screen there. But how do you, like, emotionally, what do you say to your team? This is the hardest part about football because it's the ultimate team sport. We both played football and stuff.
Yeah.
When you have a heartbreaking loss, it's sometimes worse than the 21-10, like where you just beaten. This is a game you should have won. And then the flow of the second half of what you just described, especially the onside kick, that's a punch to the gut.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'll own it. My prediction of this game was 41-7. I thought Chris Kleiman was going to say enough was enough after only winning by 3 from an FCS opponent the week before. You know, coming from an FCS ranks of him, you know, of Chris Kleiman, that's where his roots are. I thought he would just say, okay, enough's enough, and he was going to make a statement here. And my mindset was that that's what exactly they were going to do. They were going to bounce back after the Iowa State loss, after the close loss to North Dakota, and make a statement against Army, a team that was upset the week before by an FCS opponent. And that didn't happen. It was the complete opposite. So when I said the same thing on the reaction show. I said, where do you go from here? What is the conversation that you need to have with this team? Because you got to make sure you can at least have some confidence. You can't lose the locker room, especially in this era with the portal, with NIL. Team players can decide that they're better than the program and then ultimately, you know, just leave. And then that's the big issue. You can't have that when statistically your season's not over because you still have, you know, 8 more Big 12 games to play. And although I don't have any faith in this team at the moment, I know we're going to talk about it in just a minute, it's still statistically still there, right? You can still find yourself in Arlington somehow, some way. Although I'm not optimistic about that conversation. I think there's 2 things that have to be done, Brian, if you're going to improve. And it starts this Friday on national television against Arizona. a team that is struggling, a team that struggled last season. Because I thought Brett Brennan was coming in the hot seat, but they've looked pretty good offensively as well. Noah Fafita is not afraid to throw the football, and that's where it starts right there. Number one, the secondary has not been impressive by any stretch of the imagination. And you can say that it was because of the gas defense, but even against North Dakota, they let up some easy passes against a quarterback who was making his first collegiate start. Army also had a quarterback who was playing their first collegiate start at quarterback, and they didn't do well. The secondary, I mean, I'll make a bold take here. I think it's the worst secondary so far, at least as of right now, in the first 3 games of the season. It's the worst secondary in Kansas State in the Chris Kleiman era, in my opinion, of course. But I think it's fair, and I think many people are going to drop in the comments, Kansas State fans, and agree with me on that one. But that's number one that has to be fixed. Number two, and I'm going to go right to the offense here. And although you want to say Avery Johnson, he's the easiest one to point at and say he's got to get better, I don't think he's the problem. I do think he needs to run the football more. I think Matt Wells needs to utilize him more in the playbook because he's just not getting the right answers for Avery Johnson. But the running game period needs to be there. It's non-existent. With Dylan Edwards being out from injury, that's some of the reason, sure. But I don't even know when Dylan Edwards comes back if the problems get fixed, because the offensive line is just not getting any push, Brian. Against the service academies, where size is an issue. It's always been an issue with service academies because of their fitness standards and the way that they have to stay up to size. The trenches have always been an issue for service academies. Kansas State, a team who has been known for generations, for decades, about having top offensive linemen. I mean, NFL season just kicked off this week. Cooper Beebe is the starting offensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys. And he was just with Kansas State a few years ago, just for a prime example. This offensive line's getting no push at all. They couldn't do it against FCS North Dakota, couldn't do it against Army. They couldn't do it against Iowa State either. I just thought it was because of a guy like Dominic Orange. No, it's just because this offensive line is not working. It's not making it happen. Mostly in that interior offensive line, they're kind of soft.
Well, if they're kind of soft, they're kind of in big trouble, because I pulled up the schedule, and I just want to read this for folks. We play the game on a Friday, which is not great, by the way. At Arizona, night game, that place will be electric. They've got nothing to lose, and they can see blood in the water. Not good. Yeah. The game that you have after is after a bye, which probably will come at a good time. That bye. Then they got UCF, which is not good. If Kansas State loses the UCF game, I'll say it so you don't have to. Kleiman could be in trouble. That's a bad football team. I picked UCF to win 4 games. If you lose to them at home, this sucker's going sideways. And it could come off the rails. We'll talk about that secondary. But then after that, you play at Baylor and you host TCU, 2 teams that have electric quarterbacks. So to your point, I'm glad you mentioned this. Nice foreshadowing. That secondary doesn't get fixed, you're in trouble there. And then, oh, by the way, you always beat Kansas, but you play them on the road, and Jalen Daniels does not suck. I mean, this schedule could, before you even get to the end, I'm not even going to talk about that. They could be below 500 at the midpoint. And if that's the case, we'll talk about this in the last segment. Can you keep guys like Avery Johnson on your roster going into their last year? Do you have guys like Brown and some of these other guys that just say, screw this? In today's world, this is not a Kansas State thing. This is a college football thing because of the immediate transfer rules and eligibility. If a team goes south, what is the buy-in in the month of November? Even teams that you're definitively more talented, and again, you can apply this to any squad where things go sideways, it can go really crazy, and guys already know they're transferring, missing work, like the whole thing. When we come back, we're going to talk about that because it is a big, big deal. That is next here on this crossover of the Portal and Locked On K-State. All right, if you haven't been around some of the old cool hats that they had, I used to wear them all the time, and college football fans know what I'm talking about from the 80s and 90s. If you could go back in time and sit in the front row of your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be a hat from the game. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles that I used to wear in the 80s and 90s, and they're really cool. Guess what? You can still get them and get them at the price that they used to be, because hats today, like these $30, $35 hats, it's ridiculous. You can get it with the game. So when you use code Locked On, you will get your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head over to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code Locked On for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. All right, Christian, we just brought that up, and I took that off your plate, so you don't have to say it as the host of Locked On K-State, but I'm sure it's been on your mind. Like, if this continues down this path, where is this going? I think Kleiman can be in trouble. This is my opinion here. I mean, Christian can make his own statements, but I guarantee you, as somebody who follows the portal on the daily, that's how this works. If you're 2-4 or something like that at the midpoint, or even 3-3, this sucker can go sideways because the schedule is not friendly, and you're playing in a league where it's always competitive anyway. And K-State's one of the better teams. Everybody circles K-State. So if they see blood in the water, tell me why I shouldn't think that there isn't going to be a mass exodus if they've got like 4 losses, something like that, going into November. Why would I not think that?
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I'm just kind of going back to what you said initially before we talk about that, about the schedule. You know, you said about UCF, just putting that in perspective. You're coming off the bye.
They're not good.
Chris Kleiman, since he's been with Kansas State, his record after a bye is below 500. So just
how is that possible?
It's been one of those things, right? It's one of those things to keep in mind as well. And there's 3 byes on the schedule this year because of Dublin, because of the week 0 game. I am very skeptical about this schedule now. I mean, talk about that secondary that we've discussed in the second segment. If you going into Waco, Sawyer Robinson put up almost 400 yards, or he did put up 400 yards against an SEC secondary of Auburn. And then what he did against SMU this past week as well. What's he going to do against the Kansas State secondary that struggled against Army and North Dakota? Yeah, pretty concerned about that one, but that's for another conversation. Look, you have to find a way to continue to win this locker room. Chris Kleiman continues to want to be a player-led organization, the player-led program. And if those leaders on this team, which is those guys that you're referring to right now that could just leave, decide that they no longer want to be at that program, like an Avery Johnson, a Jace Brown, a Dylan Edwards, some of those guys, maybe some of the top recruits even in the system, like a Lincoln Cure, who Kansas State has been so excited to bring in, top recruit in program history, according to 24/7. And you could lose them if you lose this locker room. And that is something that is easily could happen if this continues to go down the drain. I mean, right now should be the meat and potato of the easy portion of your schedule. And you should be getting ready to fight the gauntlet of the Big 12. But instead, you're letting North Dakota stick around with you, and you do squeak that win. You let Army sneak by, but you don't get lucky this time. You get one of those red L's next to your name, Brian. And then you're worried about Arizona on the road after a short week, after trying to figure out what just went wrong with Army. Oh, and by the way, in only 6 days, you have to, 1, travel to the West Coast and play a night game against Arizona. That's nightmare fuel. That's absolute nightmare fuel for Kansas State. So I don't know, other than winning the locker room, making sure you don't lose it. I mean, there's a lot of issues that could go wrong. And I would not be surprised this offseason, if it continues to go in this same pattern, that you and I are going to do a lot more crossovers, because a lot of major players at Kansas State will be entering the portal.
That is not great, as the saying goes. That is not great at all. I would imagine that you have thought about, okay, what needs to happen and all that. We've talked about the O-line and the secondary and stuff. That's just in practice coaching stuff. You just got to see if that plays out. But I don't think it's necessarily a talent issue. Maybe O-line, you can always use a first-round draft pick at right tackle or something. I get it. But outside of that, like, what is it? Is it the chemistry fit? Because, like, the secondary, they gave up 7 out of 11 passes to Army. I was just looking at the stats, like to the starter. Army's a hard team to prepare for, but they weren't great. And Rocco's a good quarterback. They weren't great against Iowa State, but Iowa State was breaking in a bunch of new receivers. We thought that would be a major advantage. They got some good players, but they don't have the same rapport with Rocco as his last group. Okay. But you also played really poorly last week against a team that had no business being on the field with you. I'm thinking the secondary, there's something off, because they give up just enough that they've got a decent front seven. I don't, just from seeing them, but they're not very deep. So what else could they do? Like, is there something they need to do? The only thing I can think, especially if the O-line struggles running the ball, they need to let Avery, you already mentioned this, run the ball more. He's going to, I mean, they don't want to because they don't want him getting hit. I get it.
Which is such a terrible thing to say, but I absolutely agree with you. I think that's the only reason why they're making Avery Johnson not run the football. I mean, this is the same quarterback last year that had 5 rushing touchdowns against Texas Tech. In this game against Army, he had 3 rushing attempts. Like, how can you get a dual threat?
Right.
This is a quarterback who, if he does enter the portal, right? Because we're at these hypothetical conversations now, since we're talking in this third segment here every day or sticking around, you get this nice kind of juicy talk here. If we are in this hypothetical of him entering the portal, he is going to be looked at by Big Ten, by SEC schools. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when the Tennessee drama happened this past season, Avery Johnson was on the radar to go to Tennessee. That was there. Those rumors were circulating. No doubt about that. So if Avery Johnson leaves for the portal, he's going to have that happen. But the fact that, and the reason that he's going to either be on the radar for those big schools is because he's one of the greatest dual threat quarterbacks in college football, if utilized correctly. And it's not happening right now. Matt Wells is not letting that happen. And just because your other main threat on the offense and Dylan Edwards is out, doesn't mean you have to baby an Avery Johnson, especially when you're not winning football games. You can't risk losing these football games these early on just to think that maybe he won't be 100% by the time you get to Utah in November. It just can't happen.
Yeah, I could see Penn State, Florida State, Tennessee,
100%.
LSU. All those programs will lose a quarterback or not have a great quarterback option, or like somebody coming up like Castellanos probably gone to Florida State. Could you imagine what Avery would do in Gus's offense? I mean, that's
insane.
You know what I mean? There's plenty of opportunities like that. And if Dante Moore keeps on this path and Oregon loses him to the draft, I guarantee you Oregon's got deep pockets.
I think you could make this statement, and I don't think it's hyperbole or an overreaction, Brian, but I think at this moment, looking at the last 3 games, Kansas State could be potentially wasting the best talented quarterback in Kansas State history this season. Could very well be wasting the talent. Avery Johnson does have that type of potential.
Oh, yeah. I've seen him play live. Like the way he moves, the way his arm talent is, the way he can get it out quick, all those things are there. And he started to be more accurate. So, I mean, it's a long process to play quarterback. He's not where he needs to be to play for the Bills or something. But at the same time, while Josh Allen's not worried about him coming and take his job, this guy's going to play on Sunday in some capacity, even if it's just holding the clipboard. So, yeah, you're right.
I agree. If you look at his box score, you might not agree with the completion rating, especially this past week. But if you watch him day in and day out, every single game, his accuracy is 10 times better than last year. The fact that he is way more calm and collected in the pocket, none of these reasons should be pointed towards Avery Johnson, with the exception of maybe he's not helping to get the run game going. But I think that's directly pointed at the coaching and the play calling, because he's not getting the opportunities to roll out or be aggressive or have any designed run plays going. Again, 3 rushing attempts just can't happen. If you do that, if that changes, if Avery Johnson can be unleashed, I don't think we're having the same conversation we are right now.
I'll be curious to see if they give him 8 to 10, at least calling his number on RPOs where, he can pull it if the option to run with the running back is not his first choice or throwing the ball. He needs 6 or 7 minimum, is my guess, against quality teams. And now that you're into the Big 12 and Noah Fafita, for those that don't know, like, he is tearing up college football. He's a very talented passer for the Arizona Wildcats. We'll see. Taven Jackson, his dad played for the Indiana Pacers, ironically, at UCF. He can throw it around. They can't stop anybody, I don't think, but we'll see. And then you got the gauntlet with teams that can really throw the football, Baylor, etc. That's going to be hard. So you need Avery to not only score points for you, but you need him to keep the other team's quarterback on the sidelines. Kind of like what Army did to K-State's defense, to be honest, just flip the script. So I think that Avery Johnson at the portal is very likely, in my opinion, unless they fix this, because nobody wants to stay around for this. And, maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I don't really like that stuff, but the money he's going to get thrown at him if they go 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, well, anywhere in that range will be insane. Hey, come play for us. At least you'll go to a major bowl and maybe make the playoff. It's not a hard
Avery Johnson, Avery Johnson's a dual threat quarterback that's going to excel in college football, whether that's with Kansas State or not. It burns me to say it. I hate to say that, but his build, especially his strength and speed that he added this offseason, only makes him even more valuable. The fact that he's not being utilized is insane. But let me just put this into perspective. A Kansas State guy from the Ryan Wallace, you can find him on Twitter at @the_Ryan Wallace, put out this tweet last week, and he talked about some of the other past college dual threat quarterbacks of the past, aka Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. I think you've heard of them before. Lamar Jackson in college, 6'3", 200 pounds. Jaden Daniels in college, 6'4", 200 pounds. They all averaged either between 12 to 17 rushes per game. Avery Johnson right now, as I mentioned, only had 3 rushes attempts in the last game against Army. Avery Johnson's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's that exact same build. There is no reason. I'm not saying Avery Johnson's Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying he's an NFL MVP, but comparing him by body type, there is no reason why you shouldn't be utilizing Avery Johnson the way you are using him right now.
I agree. Christian, tell everybody where they can find your show.
Well, if you want to join the therapy and talk about Kansas State hopefully getting to a bowl game and hopefully finding themselves out of this gutter, you can find us on Locked On Kansas State anywhere you listen to podcasts or your favorite audio. We're everywhere, your team every day. We're bringing Kansas State coverage like no one else. We're really doing that. So you can check it out. And then, of course, you can find my personal Twitter at Christian S. Rao.
Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. You can find the portal on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Podbean, and everywhere you get your pods. Like and subscribe. Thank you once again. We will see you soon.